Rich man finds his maid hiding to eat leftovers. What happened next will break your heart. It was a sunny morning in the busy city of Chicago. Richard Miller, a rich man known for his sharp business mind and strict routine, walked into his grand kitchen after a long business call. The light from the rising sun poured through the wide windows, casting warm rays across the shining marble floors and polished countertops. Everything in Richard's home was perfectly arranged, every detail in its right place, just the way he liked it. Before we proceed, drop a comment and let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a story. Now, sit back and enjoy. But there was something odd. He heard the soft scraping of a fork on a plate. It was a sound that didn't belong in such a well-ordered home. Curious, Richard walked quietly to the source of the noise, thinking it might be one of the cleaners or staff members preparing breakfast. As he rounded the corner, he froze. There, in the far corner of the kitchen, was his young maid, Emily. She crouched low, her uniform slightly wrinkled, and her head hung low. She was eating scraps of last night's dinner, food that had been thrown away. She didn't sit at the dining table like the rest of the staff did. No, she was eating in secret, hiding in the corner like she was ashamed of what she was doing. For a moment, Richard just stood there, watching this young woman, his maid, eat food meant for the trash. A rich man who had everything, watching someone eat in the shadows, hiding as though she was doing something wrong. Richard had always seen his staff as nothing more than workers, never once asking about their lives or feelings. But this sight made him pause. Who was this woman? Why was she hiding to eat? Why did she have to take leftovers, when there was so much food in the house? He didn't want her to know he was there, so he quietly stepped back and walked away, deep in thought. That night, as Richard lay in bed, he couldn't shake the image of Emily, hunched over in the corner, eating alone. It was something so small, yet it stirred something deep inside him. He was used to thinking about money, profits, and success, but now he found himself thinking about something far more important: kindness and dignity. The following day, Richard couldn't get the image of Emily from his mind. He tried to push it aside, but it kept returning, like a quiet whisper in the back of his mind. That morning, as he made his way to the kitchen, he decided to take a different approach. Instead of walking in like he always did, he arrived early, hoping to see something that might explain what he had witnessed. When he entered, he saw Emily again. She was busy wiping down the counters, her face pale and tired, as if she hadn't slept well. She moved slowly, carefully, almost as if she was afraid of making a mistake. When she dropped a spoon on the floor, she flinched, her whole body tensing as though expecting someone to scold her. Richard's heart tightened as he watched her. She wasn't just cleaning, she was trying not to draw attention to herself, trying not to disturb the perfect routine of the household. There was something about the way she held herself, so cautious, so afraid. For the first time, Richard realized that Emily wasn't just a maid. She was a person with a life, with struggles, with fears that had nothing to do with keeping his kitchen spotless. For the next few days, Richard started to pay closer attention. He noticed that Emily always took the smallest portions when the staff ate, never sitting down to enjoy a full meal like the others. She would often skip breakfast, pretending not to be hungry, even when she clearly was. His curiosity grew, and soon, he found himself asking the head housekeeper about Emily. What he learned shocked him. Emily wasn't just working for a paycheck. She sent almost all of her earnings back home to her small town in Tennessee. Her mother was ill, and her younger brother was still in school. Emily barely kept enough money to buy herself food. She was giving everything she had to help her family survive, while she barely scraped by. Richard felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Here he was, living in his mansion, never having to worry about where his next meal would come from, while Emily was struggling to make ends meet. The thought of her eating scraps, hiding in the corner, made him feel ashamed. That night, Richard could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he had never noticed the people who worked for him. How had he become so distant from the world outside his bubble of wealth and success? Why had he never cared to ask about their lives? It was clear to him now, he needed to make a change. The next morning, Richard woke up with a sense of purpose. He could no longer ignore what he had seen, nor could he pretend that it didn't matter. The guilt from watching Emily hide in the corner, eating leftover food, had been eating at him all night. He knew he had to do something, but he wasn't sure exactly what. After finishing his morning routine, Richard made his way to the kitchen earlier than usual. He wanted to see if Emily was still moving through her day with the same fear in her eyes. As he entered, he found her once again tidying up the counters, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't notice him at first, and he took a moment to observe her from the doorway. It hurt him to see how she looked, so small, so tired, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She wasn't just cleaning, she was tiptoeing around, careful not to disturb anyone or make a mistake. Richard couldn't ignore the feeling that had been building up in him. This wasn't right. No one, especially someone like Emily, should have to live like this. She deserved better. That was when Richard made his decision. He wasn't going to let this continue. He walked over to Emily, who jumped a little in surprise as she saw him approaching. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron, straightening up as if bracing herself for some kind of reprimand. "Emily," Richard said, his voice soft but firm. "I need to speak with the staff today. I've made a decision." Emily looked at him, confusion in her eyes. She had no idea what he was about to say, but she could tell from the tone of his voice that something was changing. Richard didn't waste any more time. "From today on," Richard continued, "no one will eat separately. We'll all eat together, staff included. No more leftovers, no more hiding. Everyone deserves a proper meal, no one should feel ashamed to sit at the table. We're a team here, and I want to treat you all with respect." Emily blinked, stunned by the unexpected announcement. She opened her mouth to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. She had never expected anything like this. To her, it seemed almost too good to be true. Richard gave her a small smile. "No one should have to hide to eat, Emily," he said simply, before turning and leaving the kitchen. The announcement spread quickly through the house. The staff gathered in the dining room later that day, all looking at Richard in shock. It wasn't like him to make such a change, especially not for something as small as mealtimes. But there was a shift in the air, a sense that things might finally be different. As Richard sat at the table, he felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, he wasn't just focused on the business of running his household. He was doing something that mattered, something real. That night, as they ate together, laughter filled the room. The staff, once so distant and quiet, shared stories with each other, and Richard found himself listening to them. For the first time, he felt connected to the people who worked for him. He wasn't just the boss anymore, he was part of the team. But Richard knew this was just the beginning. He had a lot more to learn about the people around him, and there was still more to be done to make things right. But for now, he was content knowing that the first step had been taken. Weeks passed, and the changes in the household were unmistakable. The atmosphere in the mansion had softened. No longer did the staff work in silence, afraid to speak out of place. Now, there was laughter during meals, light-hearted conversations, and even moments of shared joy that had once been absent. Richard found himself enjoying these meals, surrounded by his staff, in a way he never had before. He learned about their lives, their families, their struggles, and even their dreams. It was a side of his workers he had never considered before. They had simply been part of the machinery that made his life run smoothly. But there was one person Richard couldn't stop thinking about, Emily. While the others had slowly opened up, Emily had remained more reserved, quieter than the rest. She still seemed to carry the weight of something heavy, something beyond her work at the mansion. Richard knew there was more to her story, but she had never volunteered any details, and he never pushed her. One afternoon, after dinner, Richard found himself standing in the hallway near his study, thinking about the future. He had made some good changes, but something inside him told him that he wasn't done. He had seen the kindness of his staff in their interactions with each other. He had seen the way Emily, in particular, had started to smile more often, but he could tell that the real source of her joy had not yet come. She still seemed to live in a world of quiet sacrifice, where her own needs were never truly met. It was then that Richard made another decision. This time, it wasn't about food or equality. It was something deeper, something more personal. He called Emily into his study. When she arrived, Emily looked nervous. She had no idea why she was being summoned. She stood by the door, waiting for Richard to speak. Richard gestured for her to sit. "I know that you've been helping your family," Richard began, his voice soft yet serious. "I know that your mother is ill, and your brother is still studying. I've been watching you. You're giving so much of yourself, and it's time for you to accept some help." Emily looked up, confusion in her eyes. She had never expected anything like this. "I've arranged for your brother to receive a scholarship," Richard continued. "He will have everything he needs to go to school, without you having to worry. And I've also set up a medical plan for your mother. She'll get the care she deserves." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at Richard, unable to speak for a moment. Tears began to fill her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, not wanting to seem too emotional. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Miller," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never expected this. I thought I would have to do it all on my own." Richard smiled gently. "You've spent your whole life helping others, Emily. Let someone help you this time. You deserve it." For the first time in weeks, Emily smiled. It wasn't just a small smile, it was genuine, filled with the relief and gratitude she had kept hidden for so long. She stood up, her voice still shaky but full of emotion. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Richard nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He knew this was the right thing to do. And while the changes he had made in the household were important, this was a personal shift that would impact someone's life in a way he hadn't imagined. From that day on, Emily's world began to change. She no longer felt the weight of responsibility hanging over her every moment. Her brother started attending school with the scholarship Richard had provided, and her mother received the treatment she needed. Emily began to smile more often, her eyes less tired, her spirit lighter. Richard watched all of this from a distance, and he couldn't help but feel proud of himself for making that one decision. It wasn't just about wealth or business anymore. It was about understanding the power of kindness and seeing the difference it could make in someone's life. And as he continued to share meals with his staff, as they laughed together and told stories, Richard knew that the mansion that had once felt so lonely had become a place of warmth, of genuine connection, and of compassion. Months passed, and the changes Richard had made to his life and household became a part of his daily routine. The mansion, which had once echoed with silence and formality, was now filled with laughter and warmth. He no longer saw his staff as just employees, they were part of a community, a family even. The walls between him and them had fallen, and in their place had grown a sense of mutual respect and understanding. Emily had blossomed in ways Richard hadn't expected. She still worked diligently, but her once quiet demeanor had transformed. She smiled more, laughed more, and even started to share her thoughts and dreams with the others. Richard watched her with a quiet pride. She was no longer the shy, reserved maid who hid in the corner to eat leftovers. She was a woman with hope, with a future. Richard also noticed a change in himself. For the first time in years, he felt a peace that had nothing to do with business or profits. He had always believed that wealth and success were the ultimate goals in life. But now, he realized that there was something more important: human connection, empathy, and kindness. One evening, as he sat at the long dining table with his staff, Richard reflected on the journey he had been on. He had come a long way from the man who had ignored the struggles of those around him. Now, he understood that true success wasn't measured by how much money you made or how many deals you closed. It was about what you could give, what you could share with others, without expecting anything in return. As they all ate together, Emily stood up to serve the final dish. Richard caught her eye, and she gave him a shy smile. For the first time, she wasn't just serving food. She was part of the meal, part of the family. She sat down with the others, and they all shared stories, jokes, and laughter. The mansion that had once felt cold and lonely now felt like a home. Richard had learned that compassion was the real currency of a meaningful life, and that it was never too late to change, to see things differently, and to make a difference in someone's life. And so, with each shared meal, each kind gesture, Richard knew that he had finally found the peace he had been searching for. He had learned that the richest people weren't those with the most money, but those who had the ability to give, to love, and to show compassion to others. As the evening drew to a close, Richard sat back in his chair, content. He wasn't just the boss anymore. He was part of something greater. A family, a community, bound together by kindness and respect. And that, Richard realized, was the greatest success of all. Thanks so much for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.